Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content. Subscribe and turn on notifications. He begins the recording. His voice. Steady. Measured. It's the voice he uses in the cockpit just before takeoff. A voice designed to project absolute control. Leo Vance always believed control was the simplest part of his life. At 36, he was a senior pilot for a major airline based out of Seattle, Washington. His life was a series of meticulously planned routes, checklists, and procedures. He spent 1 week a month charting paths through the sky, guiding metal birds across the continent, occasionally over oceans. The job was demanding. The schedule, a chaotic mess of time zones and layovers. But Leo loved it. He loved the sterile quiet of the cockpit at 37,000 feet, the feeling of holding hundreds of lives in his hands, and delivering them safely to their destination. What he loved even more was the return trajectory. The descent into Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. The familiar drive home to the quiet, tree-lined suburb overlooking Lake Sammamish. He would come home. To Chloe. His wife of 9 years. Chloe Vance. 34. A brilliant and driven brand consultant. When they first met, she worked for a large firm downtown. But he had worked tirelessly, taking extra routes, to give her the financial cushion she needed to start her own freelance business. He had given her freedom, and she had thrived. Or so, he had told himself. He would come home to Sophie, his 6-year-old daughter. She was the unwavering waypoint in his life, the one person whose smile could instantly erase the bone-deep fatigue of a transatlantic flight. She would wait for him by the door, her drawings of planes and princesses clutched in her small hands. She was perfect. A perfect reflection of the life he had built. And often, he would come home to Grant Holloway, his best friend since their university days. Grant was a successful personal trainer, a fitness entrepreneur, and over the years, he had become an inseparable fixture in the Vance household. Grant was always around. He trained Chloe in their home gym 3 times a week, a professional courtesy, he said. For free. He'd be in the backyard throwing a ball with Sophie. Or in the garage helping Leo with some project on the rare weekends Leo was grounded. He was Uncle Grant. The friend who never missed birthdays, summer barbecues, or holidays. The man Leo had once asked to be Sophie's godfather. Leo had trusted him. Completely. He had trusted Chloe, just as much. They were the twin pillars supporting his world. The people who made his long absences bearable, and his homecomings feel whole. A small, dry clearing of the throat is heard. He explains that their 9th wedding anniversary fell on a Friday in October. He had arranged his flight schedule months in advance, trading shifts and pulling favors, to ensure he would be home for the entire week. He returned from a 4-day trip to Tokyo on Wednesday night, slept off the jet lag, and on Friday morning, he drove into the city. He went to pick up the gift he'd commissioned weeks earlier, a custom-designed white gold bracelet, with a small, discreet charm in the shape of a compass rose. An echo of a comment Chloe had made years ago. About him being her true north. Leo remembered everything she said. He treated each casual remark, each fleeting desire, like a critical flight coordinate. You had to input the right data to reach the desired destination. The destination, always, was her happiness. Or so he believed. That night, after tucking Sophie into her bed, he set the dinner table in their formal dining room. A room they rarely used. He lit candles. He opened a bottle of expensive red wine from a vineyard they had visited in Napa Valley, on their honeymoon. He cooked her favorite meal. Pan-seared scallops with a saffron risotto. A recipe he had spent weeks perfecting, just for her. Everything was in its place. Every detail accounted for. Chloe came downstairs around 8 o'clock. She was wearing a simple silk dress, a deep emerald green that brought out the flecks of gold in her hazel eyes. He loved that dress. She smiled when she saw the table, the candles, the effort he had made. But he noticed something was off about the smile. It didn't quite reach her eyes. He registered it. Filed it away. A minor deviation from the expected flight path. They ate dinner. The conversation was stilted, full of empty space. He asked about her projects. She gave vague answers. She asked about his trip, he recounted a sanitized anecdote about turbulence over the Pacific. He sensed a distance in her. A new remoteness he couldn't quite chart. He attributed it to exhaustion. She always grew more introspective when he was away for long stretches. It was the price they paid. For the life he provided. When they finished the main course, he stood up. He pulled the small, dark blue jeweler's box from his jacket pocket, and placed it on the table in front of her. "Happy anniversary, Chloe." She opened it, slowly. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of the bracelet, tracing the delicate lines of the compass rose with her fingertip. "Leo. It's beautiful," she said. But her voice was flat. A monotone that lacked the frequency of genuine joy he had anticipated. He took her hand across the table, his heart full of his own grand gesture. "You deserve it. You deserve everything. In fact," he said, leaning in, "that's just the start. I want you to have something else. Anything you want. A trip, maybe. Paris. Like you've always talked about. Or we could finally renovate your home office. Seriously, Chloe. Anything at all. Just tell me, what would make you happy?" He was ready to give her the world. He was the pilot, and he could fly her anywhere. Chloe lowered her eyes, staring at their intertwined hands on the polished wood of the table. She took a deep, shaky breath. When she looked up again, her gaze was clear, steady, and filled with a cold resolve he had never seen before. It was the look of a pilot, who was about to manually override the autopilot. "I want a night with Grant." The silence that followed her words was absolute. A vacuum. Louder than any jet engine. The only sound was the frantic, useless crackling of the candle flames. Leo was certain he'd misheard. A pressure change in the cabin, a temporary ringing in his ears. "What?" The word came out as a strangled whisper. "I want a night with Grant," she repeated. Her voice didn't waver. It was as calm and even as a pre-flight announcement. "You said anything. You said whatever would make me happy." Leo felt the floor drop out from under him. He'd felt it once before. During a microburst over the Rockies, when the plane had plunged 500 feet in 3 seconds. But this was different. There was no seatbelt to hold him. No protocol to follow. No co-pilot to rely on. He was in a freefall. Alone in the dark. He pulled his hand back from hers. As if her skin had suddenly become scorching hot. He leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking in protest. "You're joking," he said, trying to force a laugh that wouldn't come. "That's a sick joke, Chloe." "I'm not joking." She held his gaze, her eyes unblinking. "There are feelings involved, Leo. Grant, he's been here. He understands things about me. About where I am right now. In a way that you haven't been able to. I know how this sounds. But before I make any permanent decision about our marriage, about us, I need to know if this is real. I need to explore it. Explore it." The words echoed in his skull. His throat tightened, a knot of pure, hot rage. He wanted to scream. He wanted to upend the perfectly set table, to send scallops and risotto and shattered crystal flying across the room. He wanted to wake up, and find this was all just a jet lag-induced nightmare. But she was still there. Real. And terrible. Asking for his permission to cheat on him. Explore this? His voice was hoarse, incredulous. "You're talking about my best friend. The man who eats at our table. The man who is at our house almost every day." He gestured wildly around the room. "Lily's uncle." "I know who he is," she shot back, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. "That's why I'm being honest with you. I could have hidden it, Leo. I could have lied. But I'm giving you the choice. I'm giving you the respect of the truth." Respect? The word was so absurd it almost made him laugh. He stood up abruptly, the legs of his chair scraping a violent scar across the hardwood floor. He walked to the living room window, staring out at the quiet suburban street. Lights glowed softly in the windows of the neighboring houses. Normal families. Living normal lives. How had his own meticulously crafted world disintegrated so quickly? He turned back to face her. "You're giving me a choice," he repeated, his voice dangerously low. "What choice is that, Chloe? The choice between knowingly letting my wife sleep with my best friend, or ending our marriage. Is that the choice?" She didn't answer. She just looked away. Toward the flickering candles. And in that sideways glance, that refusal to meet his eyes, Leo felt the first, sharp stab of a colder, more terrifying suspicion. This wasn't a request for permission. It was a confession. Or worse. It was an attempt to formalize something that had already happened. He didn't say another word. He turned. And he took the stairs two at a time, his heart hammering against his ribs like it was trying to break free. He walked into the bedroom they had shared for 9 years. The room where he slept soundly, trusting in the foundations of his life. He went straight to her nightstand. Her phone was there. Plugged into the charger. Its screen dark, and silent. He picked it up. He unlocked it with the password he'd always known. A password he'd once found endearing. Sophie's birthday. The screen flared to life, illuminating his face in the dim light. He opened her messaging app. He didn't have to search. The conversation thread with Grant H. was right at the top. The last message was from that very afternoon. He started to scroll. And with each line he read, he felt another piece of his world breaking away, turning to dust in his hands. He began scrolling. His thumb moving mechanically. Up the screen. The messages were a secret history of the past year. Written in the language of casual betrayal. Grant, can't wait for tomorrow's workout. Chloe, you know it's not just about the exercise anymore. A message from 3 weeks ago. When Leo was on a layover in Chicago. Grant. He's traveling again next week. We'll have more time. Chloe, I feel like I can breathe when I'm with you. You make me feel alive again. There were photos. Not explicit. But worse. Intimate. Pictures of Chloe in the garden, laughing in a way he hadn't seen in years, shot from an angle only someone standing very close could have captured. A photo of her at her desk, concentrating, a small, private smile on her face. Grant had replied to them with heart emojis and promises. I see you, one of his messages said. The real you. Leo kept scrolling, his hands shaking, a wave of nausea rising in his throat. The messages went back for months. July. June. April. This wasn't a recent lapse in judgment. This was systematic. A deliberate deception nurtured during every trip he had ever taken. Every grueling red-eye flight he'd endured to support his family, to give Chloe the freedom she supposedly craved, to make sure Sophie had the best of everything. And then he found it. The message that stopped his breath. It was from 2 months prior. A Tuesday night. He had been flying a cargo route to Anchorage, a last-minute shift he'd picked up for extra pay. Grant. Is Sophia asleep? Chloe. She went down an hour ago. The house is all ours. Grant. Perfect. I'm on my way. The phone felt heavy in his hand. A toxic object. Grant. In his house. In his bed. While his daughter slept peacefully. In the next room. The thought was so vile it made him physically recoil. He dropped the phone onto the bedspread and bent forward, his hands on his knees, struggling to draw a full breath. The air in the room felt thin, unoxygenated. He picked the phone back up, and walked back downstairs. His footsteps were heavy on the stairs. Each one a final, thudding end to a chapter of his life. Chloe was still sitting at the dining room table. She had her head in her hands, as if bracing for a storm. He didn't speak. He simply set the phone down in front of her. The screen lit up, illuminating her face with the stark black and white evidence of her lies. The exposed messages. How many times? She looked up, and for the first time that night, he saw fear in her eyes. Raw, animal fear. Leo, we can talk about this. How many times, Chloe? His voice was dangerously calm now. It was the calm he'd felt once when an engine failed over the Atlantic. The calm that comes right before you have to make irreversible decisions. I don't know, she whispered, her voice breaking. A few. She reached for the phone, but he snatched it away. A few, he repeated the words, testing their weight. They tasted like poison. A few times you brought my best friend into my house? Into our bed? While I was thousands of miles away working to keep all this together? He gestured around him, at the house, at the life they had built. And Sophie? Was she here? She was asleep. The words burst out of her, desperate. Leo, she never knew. We were always careful. Oh, well then, the biting sarcasm finally broke through his control. That makes it all better. My 6-year-old daughter was sleeping just a few feet away while her mother was sleeping with her Uncle Grant. That's a relief. Chloe stood up, tears finally streaming down her face. I didn't plan for this to happen. It happened. I was lonely. You're always gone. And Grant was just there. No, Leo cut her off, his voice firm as steel. Don't you dare put this on me. I worked. I provided. I always came home. I was always faithful. I always loved you. You chose this. Both of you did. He pulled out his own phone. Without a moment's hesitation, he found Grant's number and dialed. It was almost 10 o'clock at night, but Grant answered on the third ring, his voice cheerful and relaxed. Hey, Leo, what's up, man? Leo hit the speakerphone button, his eyes locked on Chloe's terrified face. Grant, he said, his voice flat and cold. I'm here with Chloe. She's just told me everything. There was a pause on the other end. A sudden, dead silence. What? What are you talking about, man? Don't play dumb with me, Leo snarled, the rage finally breaking through. I know about the messages. I know about you being in my house. In my bed. You betrayed me. You broke my family. You're a parasite. The words tumbled out, raw and shaking with fury. Grant stammered, trying to form an excuse, a denial. But Leo didn't wait to hear it. Listen to me very carefully, he said, each word a final nail in a coffin. You will never come near my family again. You will never speak to me again. You will never set foot in this house again. It's over. He hung up before Grant could utter another word. And threw his phone onto the couch. Chloe was sobbing now, deep, shuddering sobs. She tried to move toward him. Leo, please. We can talk about this. We can try therapy. We can. You're leaving, he said quietly. But the words carried the force of a command. Tonight. What? You heard me. Pack a bag. You're leaving this house tonight. And Sophie stays with me. Chloe's sobs turned to shouts. You can't do that. You can't just throw me out. She's my daughter, Leo. And you brought your lover into her home while she was sleeping, he countered, his voice like ice. He picked up her phone again and began methodically taking screenshots of the most damning conversations, airdropping them to his own phone and his laptop. Do you really think a judge is going to look kindly on that? I have it all right here, Chloe. Every message. Every photo. Every lie. It's all documented. She sank to her knees on the floor, her hands covering her face, her fight extinguished. I'm sorry, she wept. I'm so sorry. But Leo was already dialing another number. Her parents. He felt a cold, grim satisfaction as he did it. He was severing the connection, handing the problem off. When Chloe's mother answered, her voice thick with sleep and worry at the late call, Leo explained everything. He used short, factual sentences, stripping the story of all emotion except for the cold, hard facts of the betrayal. He was a pilot reporting a system failure. 10 minutes later, their car pulled into the driveway. Her mother came inside first, saw Chloe crumpled on the floor, and rushed to her, crying. But her father, a stern, quiet man, and a retired Marine, walked over to Leo. He looked at Leo, then at his daughter, then back at Leo. He gave a slow, solemn nod. You're doing the right thing, son, he said quietly. You take care of that little girl. We'll handle this. He nodded toward Chloe, who was being helped to her feet by her mother. That night, Chloe left the house she had helped design. The home she had filled with her things, carrying a small suitcase her mother had packed for her. She was escorted out by her own parents. A disgraced party. Being removed from the premises. After their car disappeared down the street. A profound silence settled over the house. Leo locked the front door. Bolted it. And leaned against it, his eyes closed. He felt nothing. Not relief, not sadness, not even anger anymore. Just a vast, hollow emptiness. He went upstairs to Sophie's room. He sat in the small rocking chair beside her bed and watched her sleep. Her small chest rose and fell in a peaceful, innocent rhythm. She knew nothing. The turbulence had been contained to the cockpit. The passengers were safe. He swore to himself in that moment that he would do everything in his power to keep her shielded from the wreckage. On Saturday morning, he made a call. A fellow pilot had recommended a family law attorney years ago, after going through his own messy divorce. The firm handled emergencies. Leo secured an appointment for Monday morning. He spent the entire weekend with Sophie. He kept everything relentlessly normal. He made her pancakes for breakfast, shaping them like clouds and airplanes. He took her to the park, pushing her on the swings until his arms ached. He read her 3 bedtime stories instead of the usual 2. She asked about her mother only once, on Sunday afternoon. "Where's Mommy?" "Mommy went to visit Grandma and Grandpa for a little while," Leo said, his voice perfectly even. The girl accepted it without another question. She was used to one of her parents being absent. He realized with a sickening lurch, that she was probably just as used to her mother's appointments or girls' nights, as she was to his flight schedule. On Monday, Leo sat in the plush, intimidating office of Jonathan Pierce, a man in his late 50s with a reputation as the most formidable divorce attorney in Seattle. Leo laid everything out on the polished mahogany desk. The screenshots. The dates that corresponded perfectly with his work trips. A detailed timeline of Grant's presence in their home. He explained how Grant was Uncle Grant, how the affair had taken place under the very roof where his daughter slept. Jonathan Pierce listened intently, his reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed the documents. When Leo finished, the lawyer leaned back in his leather chair, a grim look on his face. "In Washington, we're a no-fault state, so the affair itself won't directly impact the division of assets," Pierce explained, his voice calm and authoritative. "However, it can absolutely influence custody decisions. If we can demonstrate that a parent's behavior has created a negative or unstable environment for the child." "And Mr. Vance," he said, tapping a finger on a particularly incriminating screenshot, "this is a 5-alarm fire in that regard. Bringing a lover into the family home, especially one the child knows and trusts as a family figure, is a fundamental breach of parental judgment." "I just want to protect my daughter," Leo said, his throat tight. "And that's exactly what we're going to do," Pierce replied. "We'll file for divorce immediately. We will seek temporary primary custody for you, with supervised visitation for her. We have a very, very strong case." The divorce was officially filed on Tuesday. Chloe received the divorce papers at her parents' house. According to the flurry of emails between their lawyers, she was devastated. Blindsided by the request for sole custody. She tried calling Leo a dozen times, sent a flood of desperate text messages. He never answered. He blocked her number. All communication, he instructed, must go through Jonathan Pierce. His life now had a firewall. In her legal response, Chloe argued for shared custody. She claimed she was a good mother, that the affair was a terrible mistake, but did not impact her ability to care for Sophie. But Pierce was relentless. He presented the evidence in the preliminary hearing 3 weeks later. The texts, the timeline. He brought in a child psychologist to testify about the potential emotional damage to a child who might one day learn her mother had an affair with a man she considered an uncle. The judge, a stern, no-nonsense woman, reviewed the documents and listened to both sides. The ruling was swift. Leo was granted temporary primary custody. Chloe was granted supervised visitation, twice a month, at a neutral third-party facility, pending a full psychosocial evaluation of both parents. Leo remembers watching Chloe leave the courtroom that day. Her face pale and streaked with tears, supported on either side by her parents. He felt a flicker of something pity, perhaps, but he extinguished it immediately. It was a system warning he chose to ignore. This was the necessary outcome. Meanwhile, the fallout for Grant began. Leo didn't have to do a thing. Word spreads quickly in tight-knit suburban communities and social circles. Many of Grant's clients were couples, mutual friends of Leo and Chloe, people from their neighborhood gym. When the story got out, the wife of his best friend, a pilot who was always traveling for work, the cancellations started. It was a quiet, devastating boycott. Grant tried to save his business, offering discounts, but his income plummeted by more than 60% in 2 months. The upscale gym where he taught group fitness classes terminated his contract after management received multiple member complaints. Chloe faced her own professional ruin. As a freelance brand consultant, her business was built on referrals, and her pristine reputation within Seattle's professional community. Once the reason for the divorce became known, and in a city where social and professional circles often overlap, it happened fast. The contracts dried up. A major corporate client, whose CEO happened to be a member of Leo's aviation club, terminated a rebranding project midway through. Another client, a family who had hired her to design a new logo and website for their winery, simply stopped replying to her emails. Party invitations stopped coming. Mutual friends grew distant, though many sent quiet, supportive messages to Leo. Her world, like his, had been shattered. But where he had found a way to take control of the pieces, hers had simply scattered to the wind. The months that followed were the most difficult of Leo's life, but also the most focused. He adjusted his flight schedule, using his seniority to bid for shorter, domestic routes with quick turnarounds. It meant a significant pay cut, but Sophie was the priority. He made her breakfast every morning. He walked her to school. He was there to pick her up every afternoon. He helped with homework, made dinner, and read bedtime stories until his voice was hoarse. On weekends, they explored the city. They went to the zoo, the science museum, the aquarium. They stayed home and built elaborate Lego castles that filled the entire living room floor. Sophie gradually began to ask more about her mother. Leo never spoke a single bad word about Chloe in front of her. He explained, in the simple, honest terms a 6-year-old could understand, that mommy and daddy weren't going to live together anymore, but that they both loved her more than anything in the world. She accepted it, with the heartbreaking resilience of a child. She had to. Chloe saw Sophie every other Sunday for 2 hours at a sterile visitation center. The visits were tense and awkward at first, overseen by a watchful social worker. But slowly, Sophie adjusted to this new, strange reality. Grant reached out to Leo once. A long, rambling text message filled with apologies, saying he never meant for any of this to happen, that he was a coward and a terrible friend. Leo read the message, deleted it, and blocked his number, too. Weeks later, he heard through a mutual acquaintance that Grant had moved to Portland, trying to start over. He and Chloe didn't stay together. According to Chloe's father, who maintained polite, minimal contact with Leo for Sophie's sake, their relationship collapsed under the weight of the guilt and the consequences. They had tried, briefly, but it was impossible to build anything on the ruins they had created. He stands in his backyard, watching Sophie play with the golden retriever they'd adopted 4 months earlier, a goofy, lovable dog named Buddy. She is laughing, a pure, unburdened sound as she runs barefoot through the damp Seattle grass, the dog barking and jumping around her. For the first time in a very long time, Leo feels something approaching peace. The house is quieter now. No Chloe. No Grant. There are no false smiles. No hidden text messages. No undercurrents of secrets. But there is honesty in the silence. There is clarity. The psychosocial evaluation had concluded what Leo already knew: he provided the more stable and consistent environment. The court granted him primary physical custody. Chloe now had unsupervised visitation on alternate weekends. She was rebuilding her life, he'd heard. Living in a small apartment downtown, taking on smaller, less glamorous design projects. He didn't wish her harm. He just wished she would remain a distant, manageable variable in his flight plan. He was rebuilding, too. He had started taking occasional international routes again, confident that Sophie was well cared for by his parents, who had moved to a condo just 20 minutes away. He had started therapy. Which is what led to these recordings. A place to process the betrayal, the loss of his marriage. The end of a friendship he once thought was for life. He made new friends at work. Other pilots who understood the unique pressures of the job, men who shared similar stories of relationships strained by distance and time zones. They understood. One night, after tucking Sophie in, Leo sits on his back porch with a cold beer, gazing at the distant, dark silhouette of the Olympic Mountains. He thinks about Chloe. And about Grant. He thinks about the life they almost had. A life that was perhaps never as perfect as he had meticulously constructed it to be. He thinks about how trust, once it suffers catastrophic failure, is nearly impossible to piece back together. He thinks about how he had offered Chloe anything in the world, and she had chosen the one thing guaranteed to destroy it. But then, he thinks about Sophie, sleeping peacefully in her room, safe and loved. He thinks about Buddy, snoring softly at his feet. He thinks about the flight he'll command next week, the clouds he'll slice through, the cities he has yet to see. Life moves on. It's scarred. It's altered. But it moves on. Leo Vance had learned in the most brutal way possible that not every storm can be navigated around. Some you have to fly through. But he had also learned that even after a catastrophic fall, it's possible to find solid ground again. And he learned that loyalty, truth, and a parent's love aren't negotiable. They have no price. And they should never, ever be mistaken for weakness. He finishes his beer, stands up, and goes back inside, Buddy trotting at his heels. He walks through the quiet, orderly house. He checks on Sophie one last time, then walks to the front door, and slides the deadbolt home. The sound of the lock clicking into place is loud and final in the silence. The night is cold and damp in Seattle, but inside the house, there is finally a real, predictable, warmth. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next.